Hello and welcome to our study today. We're on Lesson 3, Esther chapter 2. Just a little bit of a review here. The theme of the book of Esther is God's timing is always perfect. In other words, the sovereignty of God. It means God is in control. It's God's providence that we're talking about. I always think it's interesting. The word providence, the English word comes from a Latin word which means pro video. That's what the word providence means. So God is seeing everything ahead of time before that it happens, and that's his huge foresight. I heard sometime, and I don't know where it came from, but that the hand of God is in the glove of human events, and that's very, very true, especially here in the book of Esther. So here's what we found in our study so far. King Xerxes is having his 6-month planning session in the capital city of Susa, an extremely expensive planning time with huge banquets and parties to impress all of his guests. He's planning, according to historians, for his conquest over Greece. And yet we find out, according to history, that he lost that battle. King Xerxes, in this time, he commanded his queen, Queen Vashti, to come and appear before him so he could show her off to all of the important people of his 127 provinces so that he could, show off her beauty. And so if you remember, his request was that she come, and her answer was, I refuse. She refused to go. The king's cabinet declared, we can't allow this to happen. The king must replace the queen because we can't allow this testimony to be sent out throughout the entire empire for all of our wives to see that Vashti did not obey the king, and so we don't need to obey our husbands. Remember, it was a very male chauvinistic society. And so Vashti was removed. It wasn't a pleasant thing for her, but it's something that happened. The decree that a king makes or that he signs or establishes cannot be refuted. It can't even be refuted by the king himself once he's made a declaration. And so this was sent out to all the couriers across the land that Vashti was being replaced. Now, as we look into chapter 2, and that's what we're going to do here today, we see that Esther, the Jewish young woman, is elevated to prominence. God allowed Esther to have a position so that she could later be a deliverer of her people, the Jews. This was even before it was time that it was needed. But God works ahead of time so often. It shows his far-reaching hand into the lives of his people. Again, God's timing is perfect. We don't always think it's perfect, but it is. So let's look here. The plan to replace Vashti, we read in the first 4 verses of chapter 2. And as we read these, let me just give you a little bit of a thought here. 4 years have basically passed. Vashti has been disposed. And during the time, Ahasuerus has had his ill-fated Greek campaign and came home in humiliation instead of honor. We read in verse 1. Later, when King Xerxes' fury subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. It kind of appears when I read that King Xerxes maybe had second thoughts about what he had done. I mean, too late now, baby. You made your decision. And that's what anger will do. And he was very angry. He was humiliated. He was drunk. And when we make decisions in anger, we generally pay the price for that. We're told in the book of Ephesians in the New Testament, chapter 4, verses 26 and 27, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold, because that's what we do. Now, verse 2 in chapter 2 of Esther. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. These attendants perhaps thought, we don't like the king being angry because when he's angry, nobody's happy. So let's make him happy and let's do a search and bring all these young virgins in so that the king can choose a new queen for himself. And so The word virgins there refers to young women who are of marriageable age. The king had a harem of women. He could snap his fingers and in a moment, he could have any woman that he wanted in his bedchamber, and that was done quite often. But King Xerxes was not interested in a one-night encounter. He was interested in a lifelong partner, someone that he could do life with and truly would end up caring about him, and they could do life together. An ancient writer wrote that from the 360 concubines that were assigned to the king, one for each day of the civil year, there was born to Ahasuerus 115 sons. So that lets us know of the type of life that he lived. Let's jump into verse 3. Let the king appoint commissioners to every province of his realm, to bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, said that it would have been customary for the king to bring in 400 women for him to select from, and for him to meet with all of them, or the majority of them, and for them to come and spend the night with him at least one night, for him to actually get to know them. The women, all but one, who were not chosen as queen, the rest became concubines of the king. And most of them from that point on were kept secluded, whether he ever saw them again or not, to where they never really were a part of society and they were never allowed to marry. Kind of an entrapment, wouldn't you think? Verse 4, then let the young women who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king and he followed it. So now let's jump into verse 5 because we're going to read of Esther's selection. Now there was in the city of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiachin, king of Judah. So Kish was Mordecai's great-grandfather. Kish was also the father of King Saul that we read about in 1 Samuel chapter 9. So all of this is leading for us to understand the big enemy in this story being Haman. Agag was the enemy of King Saul, and Haman was from the family of Agag, the Agagites. And so there was a lot of hostility built up through Haman's family against the Jewish people. Let's look at verse 7. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken care of her as his own daughter when her father and mother had died. So Hadash was Esther's Hebrew name. Her name Esther was given to her as a Persian name to protect her identity so they would not know her true nationality. This gave her an opportunity being a queen in Persia. The word Esther is, like I said, it's a Persian name and it means star. So Esther was Mordecai's cousin. Some say uncle, but more of a cousin, and so he raised her like her own dad. And so he carried responsibility for Esther and felt that responsibility. Now, I want you to note that Esther was really an amazing young woman, but she was imperfect like you and me. And here's how we see God's grace come into play in the book of Esther with people, because these were people like you and like me. They were imperfect. Now, I want to say a couple of things, and none of this is to imply that Esther was a bad person. She was not a bad person. She was an amazing young woman, but she was not quite as devoted, maybe, perhaps, as most Jews in that day and time were. She cooperated with the practices that were contrary to the Mosaic law. How? Having sex with a man who was not her husband. She married a pagan believer, and apparently eating the king's food, she was eating food that was unclean according to Mosaic law. Now, again, I'm not knocking her because I think she was a fantastic young Jewish woman. And it is really possible that God once again did all of this to display his grace and show that he does what he does because that's his plan, not because of our goodness, but rather his goodness. So God used Esther and Mordecai to be co-Hebrew heroes in this entire story, which we'll be seeing as everything kind of draws out. So Esther is a picture of God's grace, which all of us need. Now let's read a little bit more here. We'll begin in verse 8. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under care of Hegai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Hegai, whom had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. So God gave Esther favor with Hegai, this guy who was a chief officer of Xerxes. Now I want you to think about that. God gave her favor. Mordecai encouraged Esther to cooperate with the king. He kept in communication with her because we read in verse 10, Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day, he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. And so he loved her again like a daughter, and he kept his eye over her the best way that he could. But we just read, Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. So I want you to get the picture. Esther was one of several hundred women in King Xerxes' harem, and yet she still had that love and that respect for the man that raised her. That's pretty cool. We read in verse 9. Actually, I'm going to reread. She pleased him. Who? Hegai, the king's chief eunuch, and won his favor. And this is cool. Immediately he provided her with, notice, again, beauty treatments, special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. God gave her some special privileges because God had a big plan. And so God gave Esther approval, and immediately this chief eunuch placed her in prominence with 7 female attendants, beauty treatment, special food, and then he moved her to that special place in the harem. Why am I repeating all of this? Well, it's because God had a plan for her. No one knew her nationality other than Mordecai. No one knew that she was a Jew. No one knew her family background, because there would have been no way that she would have been able to have this place of prominence, perhaps ready to be the queen of the king of Persia. See, God had this big plan for Esther, but not only Esther, but for his entire Jewish people that were in that entire province, or all of the provinces. And yes, God has a plan for all of his people. And here's what that means. It means God has a plan for you. And so whatever you're going through right now in your life, whatever you're struggling with, whatever your family's struggling with, the Lord does care, and he loves you, and he's still working his timing, and his timing is perfect. And sometimes we don't feel that, but please understand and accept and embrace that God is in control, and he's working things out in your life. I'll close this lesson, and I hope that you join with us on lesson 4. And so please read the rest of this chapter. God bless.